good afternoon. I hope you're enjoying the summit so far. I'd like to welcome you all to this amazing panel discussion where we'll be having a commercial side and a regulator side to discuss building ecosystems, building a FinTech ecosystem beyond borders. Let me welcome my guests, please. Mr. Hashim Shawa, the Group Chairman of Bank of Palestine, in addition to His Excellency Khalid Lebses, the Director of the Financial Sector Development at the Saudi Central Bank, SAMA, from Saudi Arabia, and Abdullah Al-Hannai, the Chief Executive Officer of the National Bank of Oman. And we have a real difference of opinions. We were having a very interesting discussion before we came in, but before we begin, we need to acknowledge that the region, the Middle East region, is the fastest growing region when it comes to real-time payment, and Saudi Arabia is now number 10 globally when it comes to the growth and the speed of the growth. So we will start from the commercial side. We'll discuss that first, and then we'll go to the regulator side. So I'll start with you, Mr. Hashim, and discuss how did you go about building the FinTech ecosystem?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mayan. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be on this panel together with my friends and colleagues, Abdullah and Khalid. And if I can also give a special thanks to the DIFC, our good friend Arif Amiri, and also His Excellency, the Governor of the DIFC. So I just want to dive in and say that we are, as the oldest bank in Palestine, established in 1960, we are maybe the youngest bank in terms of innovation and technology, and our determination to build innovative ecosystems. So although we are, the biggest lender of SMEs, and that's what traditionally most economies are made up of, 90% or more of economies are made up of SMEs, we have taken it as our duty to be an innovation ecosystem builder. You've all witnessed how much banks have invested in technology. We essentially have become tech companies, but we went a step further of actually looking at the ecosystem more than 10 years ago, and established the first VC fund in Palestine, Ibtikar Fund 1. It's invested in almost 30 companies. Many of those companies have gone not only to the region but beyond, are doing amazing business in markets in Latin America, in the US, around the world. And now we are establishing the second fund, a VC fund, Ibtikar Fund 2. And so that's the first step. The other step we did, and I'll mention, we have with us here amongst the Bank of Palestine delegation, we have also our head of the CEO of Intersect Hub, our innovation hub. And so banks are kind of downsizing in terms of, the physical operations as we digitize, right? So we have a lot of real estate branches all over the country, but in the big cities and towns, we decided to actually allocate some of those freed up spaces to innovation labs and innovation hubs. And that's where we created this innovation hub called Intersect, which is an incubator. So the bank is sort of an incubator of an incubator.
So how many companies now?
So I think if I look at the number of companies that go through this network of incubators, it must be hundreds have gone through it. And then that feeds the VC fund that we've established. But if I can go just one step before that, is I think 13 years ago, the bank looked at our FinTech ecosystem and looked at innovating our system and established our own FinTech startup called Palestine Payments, PalPay, not to be confused
PayPal.
with PayPal. So that company actually was also looking at the unbanked, because in our country, and there's a lot of countries that are still very underbanked, it actually converted the point of sale machines that are, what banks typically have, and card holders using payments using their cards at the machines. We converted those machines into point of payment machines. So from being a billing aggregator to cash assistance and remittances, allowing people all over the country, not just in the main cities, so serving marginalized communities and serving the unbanked through those point of sale outlets have turned into point of payment outlets. And that also brings a lot of merchant, traffic to those merchants from people who are not only coming to buy stuff from those shops, but they come and do their payments and they receive salaries or remittances or assistance. So these are just some of the things. I could go on, but I need to manage
Well,
time here.
we'll
Thanks.
listen to National Bank of Oman's take on that. You're a middle-sized bank. Bank of Palestine started about 10 years, 13 years ago in this direction. How has the National Bank of Oman built their FinTech ecosystem, let's say? Are you being part of the ecosystem? Are you investing in it?
So formally, we're just embarking on that journey. Actually, maybe one of the reasons I'm present here is the conversation we had with the IFC over the past few months in terms of discussions in ways and means of how we are collaborating and potentially collaborating on that front. But please allow me maybe a step back a little bit. Again, very similar. National Bank of Oman is the oldest locally incorporated bank. We were incorporated in 1973, and we've just celebrated our 50th anniversary. Historically, the bank is known as a tech bank, producing a lot of firsts, but a lot of those firsts are in-house built, including the mobile app, the corporate internet banking, etc. So a lot of things were done in-house. Your description of the bank being a mid-sized bank is very important in terms of how we think about an
Does
ecosystem.
it give you more opportunities being a mid-sized bank?
It's a challenge and opportunity. An opportunity from perspective that we will be more flexible, we are more amenable to collaboration and partnership. Actually, and it's a public document, you can see it on our website. Our strategy is summarized in a nice one single slide, has 9 pillars. One of the pillars is partnership, the other pillar is digital. So that is part and parcel of our strategy for the next 5 years. The challenging piece is how are we able to scale? How are we able to maintain and retain talent given the competition globally around talent? So it's very difficult to continuously invest on an in-house build everything or most of the things that we need, especially that technology is moving advancing quite fast and new solutions being offered on a day-to-day basis. What's the solution in our mind, or what's the way forward, is to work and partner and collaborate wholeheartedly with different entities. And we have historical example as well. Just before COVID, we partnered with a local telecom company and a fintech out of India to work on a wallet. That wallet was predominantly to focus on remittance business, especially on the blue-collar labor force, who tend to be unbanked in a sense. So that was one way to tap into a segment of business that we wouldn't have been focused on in the past.
If we have time, we'll talk about local talent, if there are, and if you are actually investing in them. But let's bring it together from a regulator perspective. Before we came in, we were discussing, I was telling you that 147 companies were regulated, fintech companies were regulated in Saudi Arabia in August, and your team mentioned that by now there are 177. The fintech industry is quite well regulated in Saudi Arabia. How does the regulator come in here in the ecosystem? How do they support this ecosystem?
Great. Thank you, Maya, and thank you for the DIFC for the invitations. Just a disclaimer, I had a sour throat this morning, so I'm not in my best shape today.
سلامتك.
Thank you. I think I just looked back on Saudi Central Bank journey when it comes to fintechs. It really started in 2018 when we established our regulatory sandbox, and the idea is really to explore use cases that are unregulated, and there's really no current regulations that can exist to support these use cases. And I think that will give us a lot of opportunities to learn more. So the first wave was really payments, where we've seen a lot of payment companies enter into our sandbox when it comes, and then post that we created some regulation when it comes to wallets, major wallets, minor wallets, also different regulation when it comes to payments. Then we have the second wave where it was mostly crowdfunding, buy now, pay laters that enable us also to understand these use cases. I think last week we came up with our buy now, pay later guidelines for the public consultations. Also, few weeks ago, we came up with our payment framework updated for public consultations. And I think the next wave, which we have now, is really open banking, where we came up with the open banking framework, and we look forward for the consultations as well. So it's really these waves, and that's what happened in our sandbox. And I think what we did also last year, in June last year, the Minister of Councils announced our national fintech strategy. And that brings in different parts of the Saudi government to work collaboratively to execute that strategy. And we had an explicit, tangible KPIs where it's in the public domain. We stated that we want to reach 525 fintechs by 2030, 250 fintechs by 2025. We also mentioned the potential investments in these fintechs, the number of jobs creations, the GDP contributions. And I think that's also part now of what we call FSDP, the Financial Sector Development Program, which is a larger program, brings in different players, stakeholders in the financial sectors, us, Saudi Central Bank, capital market authorities, Ministry of Finance, and other partners in the Saudi government. And I think that's really a clear message that we want to make Saudi as one of the leading hubs when it comes to fintechs, by executing that strategy. And that's really an important message, I think. And when it comes to the ecosystem, I think it's important not just regulations. You need to have a digital infrastructure for that fintechs to work. Digital KYC, know your customer, that's really important. Cloud service providers that they can enable fintechs to flourish. Cybersecurity players. It's really, and funding, obviously. If talent is also an important part that we identified in our fintech strategy. To be successful, you need really to have all of these pillars working in tandem to have a successful fintech strategy, fintech hub, and hopefully that's where we're aiming to be. Thank you.
So let's talk about collaboration now and the importance of collaboration. Maybe this is where we talk about taking it across border. When we say taking it across border, is it related to signing MOUs, investing in startups? Is it related to going to other countries and actually investing? Mr. Hashim, you have a collaboration with the DIFC. Would this be considered your biggest collaboration across borders? Because you have an office, representative office in Chile, so you're going all over, expanding. What does it mean for collaboration?
I think collaboration is key, and it could really catalyze innovation and accelerate our expansion, and progress across the board, for the region and for the world, right? And so human capital for us. I look at the history and say back in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, there was a wave of engineers, civil engineers, structural engineers, mechanical, all these engineers that
and
came,
doctors and
lawyers from Palestine that came into this region. And I think what we're going to witness and what we are witnessing and what the bank is playing a very key role in now is the next wave of engineers, and that's what's really quite inspiring.
So
And I think
IT and
that the
technology?
DIFC has been really a home from home for us because we've been licensed here as a bank since 2015 and warmly, housed and regulated here. And it's been a fantastic journey for the bank. But like I explained, we're not your typical bank. Bank of Palestine has to do much more. We have a kind of a national duty and an ambition and a dream that's really bigger than just being a bank, in the sense that to tap into our global diaspora, our innovation capabilities, our know-how, and bridge all of that and create value propositions for the region. And I think we've been very successful in doing that. One example is that, yes, you mentioned MOUs. We signed MOUs with the DIFC FinTech Hive. We had a very successful last November, the first showcase for startups. We brought with us, I think, almost 30 startups from Palestine to the Future Museum. So again, a big thank you to our dear brother Khalfan, His Excellency Khalfan Balhoul, and the DFFF, because they helped us showcase an amazing platform that was at the Future Museum, and then at the DIFC the following day. And tomorrow, actually, we have a major event at the Dubai Chamber, Digital Economy Chamber, at the tomorrow, matchmaking. Maybe I think 50 founders from Palestine with hundreds of businesses here in the region, and so we think Dubai is just the perfect place as a launch pad, integrating our startups here, but also to the whole region and actually the globe. So that's just some of the things we've been up to.
Mr. Abdullah, you mentioned collaborating with a company in India. What about local talent? Is that something that you would work on building in Oman and moving forward, collaborating with other countries in the GCC, learning the experiences that have been done before, especially creating the framework?
No, for sure. And from my previous work experiences, we've seen that a lot of FinTech solutions, especially on the financial inclusion side, that works in one geography can be easily moved and applied in another geography. So that shows the criticality of having as much as possible a wider reach of collaboration and partnership, because not necessarily just the local ideas or FinTech startups might offer that solution, but anywhere, in any geography can be a source of ideas that might solve certain problem that you might have. Collaboration is also critical, that Oman is quite open in terms of inbound solutions. We see a lot of FinTech coming from the region, coming from the Indian subcontinent and other localities. Of course, the market is small, but Oman has always been quite open in terms of accepting solutions and ideas coming from outside of the world. So as an institution out of Oman, we have to be ready, we have to be prepared with that and accept that.
Especially with the change in the region. I mean, the biggest number of the percentage of youth in the whole region is more than
100%.
60% below 25. So you need to cater to them.
And what gives additional support to more regional collaboration is the close proximity in terms of the cultural aspect, understanding. We face very similar situations in many of the GCC countries. So there is an appreciation and understanding from both sides. So I feel that the probability of success of these FinTechs in different regional countries becomes much higher than something that might come from afar.
Your Excellency, when we talk about collaboration between the regulator's role, bringing the FinTech and the commercial banks together, from when we speak in a local perspective, do you do that role as well? And when we also speak about collaboration, how do you take it across borders?
Sure. I think we in 2018 we've started FinTech Saudi, which is a joint venture between Saudi Central Bank and Market Authorities, the two financial regulators in Saudi, and the mandate for FinTech Saudi is really to build that collaborations within Saudi and also externally outside of Saudi. And obviously, Saudi Arabia is a G20 country. We had a tremendous growth last year. There's an intense interest to come and do business in Saudi from regional and international fintechs, and we've seen a lot of interest. We're also working within different subgroups of the G20. We're also part of the BIS. There's a subgroup when it comes to fintech. There's also subgroups in IMF and also in GCC, central banks. We've seen the harmonizations of the payment systems, for instance, in GCC and the wider R board in terms of AFAQ and Buna. That's to really enable seamless, reduced cost when it comes to payments and enable fintechs. There is an active dialogue between us and fintechs in Saudi. We meet them. We have started a fintech division within the Saudi Central Bank, really to look after that relationship, to build in momentum, to ensure we address all the challenges and opportunities when it comes to fintech, whether in Saudi regional or even a global fintechs. And I think that's very important, the collaborations and bridging the gap between fintechs, regulators going forward. Thank you.
So I have to share this piece of information because I found it extremely impressive. The transaction growth is driven in the region by Saudi Arabia. The expected growth for transactions is 1.2 billion transactions per day by 2027. So that's even before 2030. So the potential is huge. But then this will bring me to our next angle, which is the challenges. And this is also from different perspectives. Someone who has started 10 years ago, someone who is starting up, and someone who is on the regulatory side. When we speak about challenges, for Palestine, let's stay away from politics. What are the main technical challenges that you would face in order to grow in this ecosystem?
Okay, so yeah, we have our fair share of politics and challenges on that front. But I would say, sometimes working and living in a very difficult country and stressed country brings out, I think, even more resilient companies and talent. And I think working and living under pressure makes you more determined and resilient and innovative to find plan A, plan B, plan C. You have to be adaptive. I think COVID taught everyone a lesson around the globe, but kind of we're used to that kind of stressed environment all the time. Okay, and so that's one aspect that I think is kind of unique to Palestine. And if I may say that, I think it was, I think now you see with what happened with SVB, this concentration of just one bank handling all tech companies and VCs and startups, and just, I think, is a lesson learned. And now you see all the big players, the big banks, banking those startups. I think that's a great sort of event, silver lining of an event. We believe and have believed by being very close to startups, day in, day out, and serving them as a bank. But typically you can't give them loans from the beginning. But if you can be close to them, mentor them, create the right mentor network, create the right incubation facilities, acceleration facilities, safe, professional working spaces, maybe bring in your bank expertise and your staff for them to be also closer to, the youth of today, the trends of today, disruptions in the world. I think it's a win-win, and I just don't understand why, we didn't do this 30 years ago. So okay, we did that 10 years ago, but I wish we started earlier. And I think by being really plugged in and close to startups, and we were talking about this earlier, that it's not just fintech in the sense that pure, banking type transactional outbound, customer facing stuff. There's a lot of internal benefits to being close to these innovations that you can derive efficiencies and get some serious shareholder value out of it, and that's great for business. So it's been a great journey. I think you mentioned about youth and education, and so some of the things that I think we did more recently was take it a step further in doing collaboration with universities. And so we just actually are in the process of signing a major program with the largest university in Palestine, Birzeit University, that where Intersect and the Bank of Palestine will basically help run their incubation and innovation hub in a technopark that they have built and received, grant funding to build a fantastic facility. But this bridge between academia and the private sector and innovation and startups and having them all come together in one place and to bring other players from the private sector into that. And then finally, last but not least, the role of regulations, and our regulator, the Palestine Monetary Authority, has been very collaborative and very supportive, and they in a way we did the first sandbox with Palpay, our company, like 12 years ago. You only heard about sandboxes, in the last, say, 5 to 8 years, but we did a live, actual live, and so I think the role of regulations but now we were saying this earlier. Now the challenge is how you get cross-border, and you were saying that there is a lot of good progress happening maybe in the GCC. I think the next step is to take it one step beyond that and look at the region and then look at the globe, how regulators and banks can and startups in this space can work together.
So it seems it's painted so nicely and so beautifully. Really, the challenges are just how to take the collaboration to the next level.
Foundations are all there.
All the foundations. And what about Oman? What do you think? Are there other challenges, or is it really that nice and that rosy?
I wouldn't call it that it's not rosy as well. So it will be unfair to say. I think there's a lot of opportunities that are emerging, and you can feel it. It's just
But building the framework is an issue, no?
And I'll come to that. But if I step back and maybe build on Hashim's comment in terms of the challenges that have emerged, that you see a lot of the fintech solutions that we've explored has always been on the front end, but then the back end were never focused or given less focus than the front end. And I think that's what excites me these days. We have currently running a few POCs with certain entities, startups, in terms of hyper automation, looking at different solutions from AI, ML, and different aspects. I think that's quite exciting to see, especially that the concept limits integration with the core banking system, which is a headache for most banks, and also has less resistance with the employer, because the tendency of employees, the tendency with employees that they feel threatened, potentially feel threatened with any kind of automation work that comes, because they might lose their job. Here you have a virtual worker sitting side by side with the physical worker or normal human being. So that's an interesting aspect, and it's a response to a challenge that we've faced. I'll just give you an example of this challenge. Was during COVID, the regulator instituted deferral for borrowers, especially retail borrowers. So we give them the opportunity not to pay their installment. So we decided to do an implementation through mobile app rather than them coming to visit a branch, especially the restrictions that was there. It was an amazing solution. We got a huge amount of those deferrals through mobile app. But guess what? On the back end, there were 3 people sitting, downloading the request.
Everything.
And that became a huge bottleneck because we didn't have a solution for the back end. So I think that's something that maybe a mindset of maybe us banks, commercial banks, we tend to have unless we think through the whole end-to-end.
So necessity pushed us in the direction of fintech because it became a necessity for the businesses.
Yeah. The other challenge is also the complexity of banking. SVP is creating another challenge in terms of the
So
liquidity.
SVP is definitely the elephant in the room. I'm sure you heard it throughout the day, every now and then, right?
So bandwidth of management and ability for us to look at every aspect becomes diluted. So again, for us, the challenge and the opportunity is, can we work with someone else to focus on certain area, collaborate with someone, and us on focusing on, say, the liquidity piece for the bank, ensuring asset quality and the other risks that are there. So again, I wouldn't say it's a rosy picture, but also it gives a lot of opportunity for enhancement and improvement.
Let's look at it from a regulator perspective. Do the regulators not have any challenges, or is it regulated enough so that in the region we do not have a repeat of what has happened in the regional banks in the US, like SVP and PacWest and others? Could it be avoided, or would that be a challenge for the future if we allow it too much?
Yeah, so maybe I'll just echo what my colleague says, and when it comes to challenges which we identified in our fintech strategy, I think talent is really a big challenge. We've seen a lot of demand when it comes to the financial sectors for the tech side and the fin side. As the country really go into this exponential growth in terms of GDP, we see a lot of demand when it comes to technology talent and financial talent. And also, I think for regulators, it's important to understand these use cases, which, for a long time, many regulators had just banks and sometimes insurance and payment companies. But now you have a use case which really cross all these verticals, and you need to understand how you regulate these new use cases. Do really fit one vertical? Are they finance companies? Are they payments? Are they insurance? Are they probably somewhere in the middle? And I think that's the challenge, and that's the reason us and many regulators created sandboxes where really come in, try in a very controlled environment, trying to understand the use cases, the implications. Central banks are really in a business of a risk mitigation, trying to understand, identify, is it AML, is it KYC risk, is it fraud risk, is it, prudentials, is it conduct risk? And I think that's really important for us also as regulators to understand all these innovative and new use cases and trying to find a framework, regulations that really fit those new use cases.
So we have a few minutes left before we wrap up, and I don't want to take it in the negative direction. And the challenges. Let's go into the positive and identify the opportunities in the market. So let's start with you, Mr. Hashim. Where do you find the main opportunities across borders for the fintech industry and for the whole ecosystem? Where are the opportunities?
I think you said the last thing, which is the whole ecosystem. And I think we took a very kind of conscious, strategic decision to be more inclusive and not to just zoom in and create like the Bank of Palestine FinTech Innovation Hub and the Bank of Palestine VC Fund for FinTech. Because I think there's just so much out there that we need to be a bit more strategic and inclusive and open. And I think banks have a duty in the sense that, well, we serve everybody, right? We are, if anything, from SVB, we learned a lesson that you shouldn't be only serving one customer segment. Mm-hmm. So I think the fact that, we are a sector that serves everyone, and financial inclusion is very much our thing. We, especially in a country like Palestine, we have been able to put together our whole ESG policy. By the way, I forgot to mention, we're the first bank in Middle East, Africa, and Asia to be gender balanced. Even at the board level, we are gender balanced. And I think having that kind of diversity, that balance, we're the oldest bank, 63 years old, but we're the youngest bank in terms of innovation and thinking, inclusivity. Like I said, we're focused on the micro and SME lending, which is important across all sectors, but we do all the big strategic project finance as well and corporate finance. So when it comes to innovation and tech, that's why we called our innovation hub Intersect, taqata, like crossroad, because it brings everyone at that crossroad, right? And I think, when we couple the VC fund called Ibtikar, innovation in Arabic, with Intersect, I think that's the opportunity. And I think the last opportunity is the collaboration, the being inclusive as a region, being more innovative and collaborative as a region. I don't need to give statistics and reports about what forecasts from the World Economic Forum, from the IMF, World Bank, from all these think tanks about the potential for the region as a region for integration. And I think innovation and tech, not just fintech per se, has just a unlimited opportunity.
Mr. Abdullah, with all those verticals with NBO, where are the opportunities in fintech towards building the ecosystem?
So from a bank perspective, I feel I share Hashem's view that it's across the board. But if I was a startup or thinking of starting something, I would focus more on the B2B rather than the B2C. We see the level of sophistication and demand coming from our institutional clients, be it government, corporates, are much, much higher than that comes from our retail segment. And I think there's a huge amount of opportunities that are emerging from there. But definitely we cannot ignore the rest of the different segments or pillars.
Your Excellency, notice how I always leave the regulator till the end because we all work under the umbrella of the regulator. So I would like you to tell us about the opportunities you view in collaboration with the private sector, with the government sector, and also how to bring fintech into the ecosystem and take it across border.
Sure. So I think if you look back at banking, really, as Hashim and Abdullah mentioned, banking sector was one of the first sectors to adopt technology. And I think that's really important in terms of cost savings, of innovations. And I think as they grow, fintechs come in and play another part. We've seen some banks globally that either they collaborate, some of them as Bank of Palestine and Bank of Oman have created a VC, a fund that really invests into these fintechs and trying to collaborate with them because innovation comes from really startups. Sometimes when you're a big bank, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of involvement, and innovation probably comes from a smaller players, not just in fintechs. I mean, globally, you see that. And I think they have a room. We've seen them, for instance, in RegTech, where they created regulatory technology that enable banks and other fintechs to comply with KYC, AML. We've seen a trend where they really play an important part when it comes to ESG, that making corporate and other banks understand their green finance. So there is really a lot of innovations and also technology innovation when it comes to the use of blockchain, distributed ledgers, in invoice sharings. We've seen that in supply chain financing. We've seen that in payments, in financial inclusions. That also really has helped us in Saudi Arabia to reach 66% when it comes to cashless. Financial inclusion has really tremendously increased in the last few years. So there's a room to play for fintechs in innovations, and there's also room for banks to collaborate, invest, maybe support some of these fintechs. And I think they're here to stay. Thank you.
Your Excellency, isn't there a thin line between regulating it too much and then stopping innovation if you do that? How do you balance?
Yes, that's an important question, I think. As if you overregulate, you suffocate these fintechs. Sometimes they're really not well capitalized. They don't have the deep pockets as some of the large financial institutions. And I think that's really taken into considerations when it comes to fintechs. Do you really apply full-fledged cybersecurity requirements that banks do that, or do you really have a scaled-down one, which we do for fintechs that they can leverage on, and once they increase their transactions, then you can increase that regulations. So it's a really balancing act. You cannot just copy what you have for large financial institutions and give it for smaller fintechs and expect them to comply with that. But obviously, as I said, central banks are in the business of risk mitigations and ensuring the financial sector is well and sound, and it's a very important sector for any country. So yes, there's a balancing act that regulators need to look at when they regulate fintechs.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Khalid Bsais, Abdullah Al Hannai, and Hashim Shawa. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us here. And thank you, dear audience, for being with us. So, FinTech is here to stay. There are opportunities, there were challenges, but with Visa and MasterCard now holding the biggest chunk of the market when it comes to the transactions, it's time for the banks and for the regulators to join. Thank you very much.